Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nick Davis, and I'm the Communications Director of LEN European Aquatics. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, with some distinguished guests, as moderator for a panel discussion entitled The Road to Better Governance, a case study from LEN European Aquatics. Our simple aim is to share some practical insights and learnings from the ongoing efforts we're making to put integrity at the heart of everything that we do. We sincerely hope you will find the presentations both useful and interesting. My guests today include the President of LEN, Antonio Silva, LEN Treasurer Andida Bouma, and Bureau members Pierre Johansen and Graeme Marchbank. May I now introduce the President of European Aquatics, Antonio Silva. Thank you, Antonio. You have the floor.
Hello, I'm Antonio Silva, and I'm the President of the European Aquatics Federation, LEN. I'm very happy to be with you today with three of my LEN Bureau colleagues to support the 2023 Sports Integrity Unit organized by SIGA. The 2023 Sports Integrity Unit is the pinnacle for all those in sports industry with an interest in sports integrity. Events are being hosted in several cities around the world as well as online, as we commend SIGA for promoting this decentralized approach to raise global awareness of its mission and vision. European Aquatics decided to partner with SIGA for this event because we are proud to be part of the world's leading global movement in the field of sports integrity, but also to show how a sport governing body can develop concrete projects in the field of sports integrity. This webcast will answer some quick questions, which I hope you will find interesting and useful. Firstly, when and why did integrity and good governance become a key priority for European Aquatics? What were the key priorities for European Aquatics, and what was the process to ensure that objectives could be achieved within agreed timeframes? What were the challenges and lessons learned from trying to enforce constitutional reform and from setting up structures for integrity and inclusion and gender equality? I would like to start by setting the scene. European Aquatics had a complete change of management over the past year and a half. When I was elected as President of LEN in February 2022, together with an entirely new bureau, it was clear that there was overwhelming support and a clear vision to end a governance system which was considered top-down and opaque in terms of decision-making, and to set up a new culture which could develop the sports of aquatic in a collaborative, inclusive, and united way. We made a thorough review of the LEN resources, structure, and operational methods so that we can make changes that will improve the organization so it can better serve the federations, athletes, and other stakeholders. But it was also vital that we worked on changing the culture of LEN to make it more open, democratic, and forward-looking. We are committed to putting integrity at the heart of everything we do, but we have also ramped our communication so that national federations are kept aware of what we are doing. We are only at the beginning of a journey to transform European Aquatics. Together, we have a lot of work to do, so the first step involves honesty about what is not working well or can be improved. Through democracy means respecting opinions and listening to different voices. This principle of transparency underpins of all our work. We have made sure that our member federations receive regular communications about bureau decisions and activities. But underpinning everything we do is good governance. Let's now go into more detail about the journey that LEN has taken on the road to better governance. And I'm delighted that I'm joined today by three of my LEN Bureau colleagues, the LEN Treasurer Andida Bouma, and two of our Bureau colleagues, Pierre Johansen and Graeme Marchbank. They will share with you the key details of three teams. Andida will share the step taken to improve LEN governance, the LEN action plan, and the relationship with SIGA. Pierre will present on the work done to introduce a new LEN Integrity Code and independent integrity unit. Graeme will describe the work done to date and planned for LEN diversity and inclusion. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me know to hand over to our moderator for the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonio. That's a very interesting introduction. And that leads us nicely to the first theme here, which will be introduced by Andida Bouma. Andida, you have the floor. And could you please, when you introduce yourself, explain a little bit your background in the sport? It isn't just as a Bureau member. And also why, if you like, you were selected to lead this important topic within LEN. Your background, if you like, your qualifications would be very interesting for us to hear. Andida, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Andida Bouma. I joined the LEN Bureau at the same time as my fellows on this call and Antonio in February 2022. And one of the, let's say, promises we made in our manifesto, what we had before we were elected, is to really strive for the highest level of integrity and standards. So implement new policies, making decision-making structures, and make sure that we govern the sport transparently and ethically. So this is a big word, let's say, big wording. And the key concept, as I think Antonio also introduced, are the integrity, transparency and accountability, cooperation and communication. I will talk a lot about that later, and diversity and inclusion. So these topics will come back in this presentation later on, also introduced by my colleagues. So we would like to take you through the journey we've been going through, and we're still going through, actually. So how are we going to implement best practice governance principles? Actually, there were few actions that we took immediately, which were already lined up when we got elected. One was to prepare for constitutional change, as our constitution was pretty, let's say, outdated. It, for example, did not have time limits for board bureau members or committee members. So that was introduced in the first Congress after our election in May 22. And we also immediately implemented what we call a whistleblowing hotline with the help of an agency where anybody basically could go and mention any items that they felt were against good governance, against integrity, any other problems they had. So that was, let's say, a really first step. But that's clearly only the start. So we had to also come up with a framework and how to measure our progress in what we were doing. So we have chosen at that moment to adopt the SIGA Universal Standards for Good Governance in Sport. Now that was, let's say, very easily said, but then the process actually also of checking that you are doing what you are saying starts. So that would be was our next step.
Thank you, Andida. What is very interesting to me actually is when you have a situation like this, such a major topic, you know, good governance or better governance, is how do you prioritize? That must be one of the most challenging parts of it. Where do you start? It's such a big job.
Yeah, I think from the start, it was quite clear that integrity was a major part of what we needed to work on, as there was really nothing in place, and later on Pierre will elaborate on that. But also, like when we started, I think we very soon found out that there was nothing in terms of how do you set up meetings, how long, you know, when do you send an agenda, when do you, so there was no policies or procedures basically in place for that. So that became a priority because it, you know, we needed to learn how to cooperate and do that in a well-structured manner. So that was what we now call our rules of procedure, which we started to develop with the help of a couple of bureau members that stepped in to do that. and which is now well, great help in you know, being efficient, but also actually transparent for everybody that's on the bureau and communicate to the outside world. All right. Well, if we then look at what we did with implementing or the SIGA standards, there was a first audit that took place right after our election, and that was basically to kind of assess the situation at that point. So not much has changed as yet. Really, we didn't even have the new constitution. So when SIGA did that audit, there were 20 non-conformities, as they call it. So before we could even get any standard, we would have to resolve those. And we worked quite hard on that. But if you look at those, I think about 6 were in the area of democracy, but the majority, basically the rest, so like 14, were in the area of transparency and accountability. And I think that was also because we were not very well aware yet of what we needed to do. So we also had to actually do better homework in terms of understanding what we would need to show, write down, how we would need to document things, how we would need to show things. And a lot of that, as Graeme also said, was about being transparent and communicating. And I think that's more also your area, Nick, communicating to our stakeholders what we are actually doing. So that I think was a big eye-opener in how to work on actually achieving these standards. And we did another kind of update audit in the second quarter of this year, and that really resulted in a lot of the non-conformities being, let's say, resolved. Particularly also in the area of integrity and diversity and inclusion, which we will hear more about, and also in the area of, let's say, transparency and communication, because it appeared that a lot was maybe there, but it wasn't like accessible to the outside world. So there, I think we made a big effort now to make sure that all of these documents and policies are actually available to people.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really excellent point, Andida. You know, one thing I feel is helpful for others to realize, often you do have the information. It's what we were saying earlier about the culture, isn't it, of openness and not being afraid to share things and being transparent. You know, the guidelines that were given to us, if you like, by SIGA to get to that bronze level. You know, yes, there's certain things which need to be introduced, but probably the majority of things already do exist. And it's a question, isn't it, of making those available and being open and not being, if you like, afraid to share information. I think, you know, and it also brings us to the next point quite nicely of the whole consultation process. You know, how important it is when you're going through these changes not to do it in isolation. Andida, I think one of the things we would say here is that all of this has been done, or the steps that have been taken so far have been done with, if you like, the knowledge of the federations, of the members of LEN European Aquatics. It hasn't been done quietly and sort of, you know, exposed at the end. This is something which has been, you know, a collaboration, hasn't it, Andida?
Yes, it certainly has, and I think that's also, if you look at lessons learned, right? Maybe first we, I think, had our own ideas and we used our common sense and we worked very hard. But it would also have maybe helped a bit if we read the policies a bit more in detail and would actually have involved more people within the organization and more of our stakeholders earlier on. Then we would probably have well, been able to go a bit faster.
Right. Well, look, thank you very much, Andida, for that presentation. Very interesting. Now I'd like to introduce another of the guests here with us, Pia Johansen. And Pia is going to talk about the detailed focus on integrity and the ethics code. Pia, like Andida, if you wouldn't mind just introducing, very briefly your background in the sport. I know you're also at the Danish Federation and the work you're doing in this area. And then please, you can carry on with your presentation.
Thank you very much. And thanks a lot for the opportunity to be part of this. I am president of the Danish Swimming Federation, and I have been that since April 21. And I was elected a bureau member together with you guys, and when Antonio was elected president in February 22. In the Danish in the Danish Federation, we have been working with also a new culture, a new strategy, a new way of doing things, and I'm of course taking this into the work I'm doing at LEN. And in my civil career, I've also experienced from this field. Yeah, what I'm going to talk about is the LEN Integrity Code. I was asked from the beginning if I wanted to be the first point of contact towards the independent hotline that we have asked the company to run for us, and I accepted, of course. And part of that was also to be the leading on this making a LEN Integrity Code. And of course, there was something before, but we again needed to restart and needed to make a culture change. So that's why we kind of wanted to start from the very beginning. And then again, maybe we did start a little bit backwards, because some people would make the code, and then when everything is in place, like it is almost now, then we would ask and start the independent hotline. We started the independent hotline right away because we wanted to be there for the athletes, that we wanted to show that this was a very important task. And I think that has been a very good choice. We have learned a lot. It has been a little learning by doing. From the very beginning, we had regular meetings with the company running the hotline, and we have had a lot of very good discussions on how this company handles the other issues, the other customers that they have. We have also, along the way, had regular meetings with World Aquatics and their ethics officer in this field, and that has given a lot of very good discussions, and also it has been very easy to be aligned all the way. If I should say a little about the process, we started designing a blueprint, and this was presented in the Congress in Cascais in May 22. And there was a lot of good discussions along with that. After the Congress, people coming up and talking about, asking questions about what they thoughts, what their thoughts had been. We of course had discussions in the Land Bureau as well, and in Rome during the European Championships last year, we had meetings with the technical committees and the athlete committee, and they were all there, and we had with each committee and explaining to them, what is this about? What is integrity? What is an integrity code? Why are we going to have this, and why is it so important? And of course, this is, like Graeme also, like you also said, this is a lot about transparency. But when it's so important to talk to everybody, it's of course involvement, and you have to feel that you are being heard, but it's also for teaching purposes. One of the big things about having an integrity code is that everyone knows how they are expected to behave, and how we are good and to each other. So that has been, that has been a very good process. Then we have been working again with the code, and And in meetings here this spring, online meetings with all Bureau members and the representatives and the committees, we have again been going through what's inside, and finally the Bureau has approved the code as it is now, and it will be ratified at the Congress here in September. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Pierre, what's very interesting to me here, you know, this process of engaging people, bringing them with you, I think is really interesting. You know, you mentioned the athletes, which I think is fundamental, but also the technical committees, other members of the Bureau. I mean, was this something that you always felt from the beginning was necessary, or did you kind of evolve into that? Because there's been literally 2 or 3 almost different sessions of explaining where you were going with the Integrity Code, why it was important. Was this always in your mind from the very beginning to do it this way?
Yeah, I think that was from the very beginning very important, because transparency was a very important thing for Antonio. So integrity and transparency and democracy, and that means that we have to discuss and we have to also understand what do we mean? I mean, what is it to be transparent? Is it enough that I say, hey, we do this, stop? Or is it also necessary to say, we want to do this because this is the best for, and this is the priority, this is how we prioritize. And then I would like a little to go back to Graeme's predictability. That is really a key word for a lot of people. We have to know what is going on. We have to be able to see this fits together. When we go do this, it means this, and it fits all the way from one end to the other. So yes, from the very beginning, I was thinking involvement, and then again involvement, and for teaching purposes as well.
No, totally understood.
Yeah. So I think that what has been very, very successful in this part is, of course, that we have had a lot of open and very varied discussions for better, and that has made better solutions. We have also been in regular contacts with World Aquatics, and that has, well, actually, I think that we have had good influence on the Aqua Code, as well as they, of course, have given us a lot for our code. So, but that has been very good. And then what I did not mention is that we made quite a small working group to draft this code. And I think that has also been essential, that we have not been too many people around the table to come up with a draft, but we have been out and getting inputs for a lot. So I think that has also been part of why we could actually come through, because it has been quite a great work. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Pierre. I mean, Graeme and Andida, I think this is another really important point of the process, and us wanting, if you like, to share, you know, best practice or what we feel were things that really worked. It's this issue of having a dedicated task force, isn't it? A small group of, frankly, they have to be very committed people who really believe in that, and literally to tick off the milestones of the work that needs to be done, because it's a lot of work. I mean, what would you agree with that? Andida, maybe first.
Well, yeah, I think it's important that in the end you have people that do the work and not just talk about it, right? So it has to be, and I think the approach we took with, let's say, a professional party ultimately helping us with some dedicated time, and some people, a limited number of people from LEN that were actually also really dedicated to getting this done. But on the other hand, also, yeah, involving a wider group, or at least making it known that we were working on this. So everybody now, once we get to approving it formally in the Congress, is aware of that we have this process, that there is this code. So that's really, I think, also an important part. So in that sense, many more people have contributed.
And not really much to add, Nick, to that, other than there's a famous saying about never underestimate the power of a small committed group of people to make change, because it's the only thing that ever does make change. So yeah, a small group working hard is the key to this, because that's the way that you lead and engage broader communities, by having those people who are owning it day to day.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right, and the whole consultative process is very important, isn't it? Of having this feeling of going once, going twice, going 3 times, letting everyone feel they're part of it, right? You know, it's part of everyone. The integrity, we want integrity to be at the heart of everything, involve everyone in all the process. I think that's really important.
But I think I would pick up on that, is just on what Andida said there, I think is true and worth emphasising. It's consultation is one thing, and making sure people engage is really very, very important. But somebody or a group of people have to do what has to get done as well. So consultation isn't about everyone standing around talking to each other. Action has to be taken, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Pia, can I ask you now to talk in the detail about the Integrity Code itself? I mean, this is a major milestone, isn't it?
Oh yes, definitely it is. Well, the code is set up. From the very beginning, we wanted to mirror the Aqua Code. It's very important for us that we collaborate with Aqua, so the sport is all aligned and fits together worldwide. So if we should say a little about, it starts with definitions. What does the word means? We chose to be aligned with Aqua in this sense, so we could pretty much actually copy paste just with small adjustments. Then about the purpose and the scope. Well, actually, and that's also why involvement and discussion has been important, because actually the overall purpose is not to have any reporting to an integrity hotline or anything else. But it will only happen if everybody knows how to behave and how to act, and of course wants to do so. But I think that part will prevent some wrongdoings within LEN. And then the purpose is, of course, also to establish some effective mechanism for enforcement of the code and sanctions if there's any violation. So that's also part of the purpose. But in general, it's about the duties of good conduct, how to be a good LEN member, whatever is your role. If you're standing there as a judge, official, part of the bureau, or in any other way, there's something about confidentiality and loyalty. There's something about gift policy. I could say that this has, in some of the discussion, this part has been has really been discussed. And on this case, actually, we are a bit different from what Aqua or World Aquatics decided, but still aligned, and that is fine. There's something about rules for bidding for events when more countries wants to do a European Championship in some discipline, and of course rules for elections, etc. Then we have the other thing, manipulation for aquatics competitions. It's match fixing. It's the betting part that is described, that we do not want to do that, and if anyone does, there will be an investigation. And then I want also to point out the safeguarding rules. And actually, this is also one of the fields that has been discussed very much, and Graeme will be talking some about this, but it's about psychological, physiological abuse and harassment and sexual harassment, and we don't want any of these. So this is also, I mean, this is the opposite. We want some good conduct, and when we're talking safeguarding, we're talking about forbidden conduct. So that's what you're not supposed to do. And that has also been one of the fields where there has been a lot of discussions within the committees during this process. Then there's I mean, this is almost half of it, and the other half of the code is more or less dedicated to how we structure the code or enforcement of the integrity code, and that's how to structure the integrity unit. And here we really wanted to keep it simple. So we have a council. It will be 3 people elected. One of them is the chair, and this council will be the coordinating part towards the ethics officer, who is the independent hotline, the officer of the independent, running the independent hotline. They will coordinate whenever there's a violation or an issue that has to be investigated. This will be done by an investigation unit. And we had quite a few discussions if we could set up a unit by choosing 3 or 5 people. But we realized within this last year, where the hotline has been up running, that it's very different fields. And for this reason, very different experience you must have if you should do an investigation in a case that is to be investigated. Sometimes it can be within one discipline, sometimes it can be match fixing. You know, so we cannot put up a small group and say, well, they have all the knowledge that could be necessary. So we will set up the investigation unit case by case, and this will be done by the Integrity Council. And then when they have investigated and finalized the report, it will go to the adjudicatory body, which will be chosen. It will be 5 members elected at the Congress as well, and they will be responsible for deciding on a sanction on some. Yeah, so that's pretty much what is what is in the code at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Pia, a couple of interesting points. I'd be interested to hear, you know, Graeme and Andida's point. I mean, you know, the interesting part is, you know, protecting the physical and mental well-being of athletes. I think what's interesting to me here is that everything should be about athletes anyway in a sport federation, but this is, for me, really crucial. And then the other thing, which you know, maybe to address that first in terms of how important this is for the athlete welfare. And then the second part of it, which I think is really interesting, is the practicalities of making sure that LEN, being the European body, is aligned with AQUA, as you said, World Aquatics Federation, so the world governing body, but also that you as national federation representatives can see that connection as well, which then leads to the athletes, ironically, at the end. So maybe Andida, Graeme, you know, what are your thoughts about those 2 parts, the athlete welfare part in the first place?
May I speak first? I think we'll talk a little moment about my background, but I'm also chair of Scottish Swimming, so represent the 20,000 members we've got in Scotland. Athlete welfare is at the centre of what we do. I think there's been too many sad and well-covered issues that have been faced by sports federations around the world in the last few years around when things go wrong in terms of welfare of our athletes. So for us, it's really hugely important. The first role with any organisation is to consider the welfare and the duty of care it has towards its members in their situation, predominantly the athletes. So for me, it is very much front and centre of consideration every single day. And I think, you know, clearly it has to be a priority for organisations, and anybody who feels differently to that just has to look at, you know, the horrific cases in the USA when clearly US gymnastics appears to have taken a priority on reputation and commercial ahead of athlete welfare, and how much harm can be done to individuals and the organisation when that prioritisation gotten wrong. So for me, it's absolutely essential to what we do as an organisation at all levels.
Andida, just a question for you, a comment regarding the, you know, this, which I think is very important, this sort of red thread that goes from world governing body, European governing body, national governing body, in terms of integrity, and that was kind of very much at the heart of the process here, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we had quite a bit of, let's say, discussions about who should be, let's say, reviewing a certain complaint or issue, right? And for LEN, for European Aquatics, that is really to everything that's related to, let's say, European Aquatics events or people that are that things that happen within our organizational reach, if you want. And that otherwise it could be within the World Organization or it could be in the national organization, and then we can actually refer to any of these bodies. But in case, for example, a national organization is not well organized in this respect, then LEN could at some point, or World Aquatics at some point, could see if they needed to do something further.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, actually, you know, we kind of decided, World Aquatics has made their code, so they are actually worldwide. So as Andida said, if they think there's a wrongdoing, very much a wrongdoing within an organization, a national federation that are not treated well, or actually also a continental organization, they could kind of go in and say, hey, we want to investigate this part and figure out what is up and down and what should be done. We have decided in LEN not, you know, to keep it simple. So we will concentrate on investigating on matters that is within LEN, what is happening at LEN competitions or related to LEN competitions. But we actually do not want to go in to the national federation. We want to say this is for the national federation, please find a solution, but we are not going to investigate. World Aquatics might want to investigate if they find it's important enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Okay, look, thanks very much, Pierre. That was very interesting exposition there. Graeme, it's now the time to talk about diversity and inclusion. So if you wouldn't mind just giving a very brief introduction of yourself and, you know, this important theme that LEN is now embarked upon.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nick, definitely. I think probably worth talking about the elephant in the room straight away of a middle-aged white man representing diversity and inclusion. Always feels slightly unusual. But my own background's probably saying I've had 35 years in sports governance, and actually started my career with the Ladies European Tour, the professional golf tour. So I've been long engaged with women's sport, then right through to sitting on the board of directors for Sports Scotland, the Scottish National Government Agency for sport, which obviously had a strong aspect of inclusion and diversity within its own remit, and then on to World of Aquatics, and say, as I said earlier, the chair of Scottish Swimming, also the board of British Swimming, and to my great fortune recently been appointed to the Bureau of LEN as well. So while I may not represent a diverse background or myself be from a minority group or underrepresented group, I like to feel that I have stood up for them throughout my 35 years of sports governance. But with that, I think for me as well, it's probably a nice way to segue slightly from what is a hugely important area. We talked about integrity and the importance of a welfare, an environment that supports sort of welfare, etc. It's to think about that in a broader sense, and that's actually about our spaces being inclusionary spaces that people feel safe and feel they can go to, feel they feel welcome. Because for me, that's a welfare environment where people come and they feel safe and they feel welcome. And clearly, a huge aspect of that is around diversity and inclusion. And I think from aquatic sport, there's an enormous opportunity because our sport is historically very inclusive, especially for gender and parasport as well. But beyond that as well, away from the sort of the natural space of LEN, which would be the historically been that high competitive space. Now we're talking more and more about aquatic sport as a broader sense. We're talking about learning to swim. We're talking about swimming pools. We're talking about then young people learning to swim. We're talking about older people whose other physical activities might be more limited, and now they can continue staying healthy in water, whether it's families together, whether it's lower socioeconomic groups as well, taking the opportunity to develop life skills that also allows them to enjoy some level of activity. We clearly have a platform and therefore a strong responsibility to consider diversity and inclusion, and then drive it forward where we have the opportunity to do so. But with that, I think we're on a journey, and clearly we've heard huge work that's been done and great success that's been arrived already through Andida and Pia as well, around the broader governance and the integrity piece, is that our diversity and inclusion agenda is very much at the start of its journey. But clearly it's a never-ending journey. I think as a society, we know, a broad society, we know that the inclusion diversity has to be something that's continually evolving, continually considered. So for me, in many ways just now, it's about setting out those core principles. We talked earlier about a committed group of individuals, and I won't speak for myself, but certainly those I've been working with in this area, led by Sarah Keane within LEN, are committed to looking at diversity and inclusion and what LEN can do, and LEN and European Aquatics can do to help that agenda more broadly. But first and foremost, is listening to our community, to know where they're having great success, where they're having challenges, and understanding then the role that LEN can play in both celebrating those successes, and there's much to celebrate, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but also where we can play a role in either sharing best practice or actually bringing our assets and our ability or our spaces where we can bring those to bear to help drive forward the agenda around D&I. So initially for us, the focus is on gender. I think that's where many organisations, where they take the first step with regards to D&I is going to be in that space, and we are doing some work with that already. And while from a participation point of view, and even a competitive point of view, we have a strong balance between male and female participation. I think it's worthy of us, or it would be unworthy of us not to point out that across our whole community, LEN included, but most of our national federations as well, the governance and representation of women in the spaces of officer spaces aren't as strong as it could be, and clearly we want to try to work with our federations and ourselves to think about how we can bring some change to that space. And then really a specific area of concern for us, a consideration for us, is about underrepresentation of women in performance coaching. So high representation, age group and developmental coaching phases, but when you get to performance coaching, female representation needs to be considered. So we're taking the first steps now to understand best practice in the federations that are trying to address this. We've already had meetings with colleagues from Sweden and from the UK as well to understand what they're doing. But we're going to go wider and broader to speak to more federations, understand what can be done in that space, and then the role that LEN can play in helping bring some change into that space particularly. But then, as we say, there's a journey to be done. There's more to go after that as well. Clearly, disability inclusion, para-swimming in particular, is a very strong sport in the Paralympics. But for the broader disability inclusion as well, you know, what we're doing in terms of representation across all the areas of aquatic sport and governance and coaching, what we can do for disability. But in some ways, the harder nut to crack, to use a British saying, is going to be about racial and socioeconomic diversity. So as we're looking now to the challenge around pool closures and also access to aquatic spaces, the role that LEN again can be that hub, that central community that can bring together conversation and use our influence and the influence of our family, our broad aquatic family can have in thinking about government investment, local authority, local community investment in around pool and pool access, and what that can do for racial and socioeconomic diversity is going to be really important as well. And then I think the last thing I'd want to say just now, before we open in case you've got any questions, Nick, is to talk about this, to celebrate the successes we do have. I touched upon it earlier on about gender balance within our participation community. It's pretty strong and clearly actually over-indexes in many places. Certainly from the own figures I know in Scotland, over 60% of not just members of Scottish Swimming, but those who take part in aquatic activity in Scotland are actually female. So that's a strong over-index when sport and participation generally is heavily biased towards males. So that's a good thing and something we should celebrate and wonder if that's a muscle that we can really use to help society more broadly. And likewise, I touched upon earlier about that age participation. Those 55 years and over, again, strong over-index in terms of participation, and those who see aquatic sport as playing a key aspect of their own journey in health and keeping themselves active. So lots to go after, but certainly we've got a platform and strong belief we've got committed individuals and also some really great assets that can help drive forward change in this space.
Yeah, thanks very much, Graeme. It's very interesting. I mean, you know, the first comment I would have, which is, you know, as let's say a high performance sport federation, what's very interesting, isn't it, is what do we do about the bottom of the pyramid, getting more people involved, the health aspects. It's fascinating to see what can be done. And maybe it's a question for, you know, Andida Pia as well. What, you know, there's a Learn to Swim Commission working very hard. There's going to be a Learn to Swim, the first one, a convention in a few months' time in Latvia, bringing together experts, government experts. You know, this is about as much health and fitness, life skills. It's a different place to elite sport and winning medals and going to Olympic Games. You know, how does an organization like LEN manage both areas? Just a question, Andida, for you and Pia, or how you see, how do you manage both? Because you need to do both. We're responsible for both.
Yeah, I think there is a clear, let's say, need for, well, the elite sport. I think is the role of LEN has always been quite clear. We organize the European Championships, right? We have a clear role there. In the, let's say, learn to swim space, the role has not been that clear. There have been some areas in the past to develop learn to swim programs, but that has been mostly left to national federations, and some have done an excellent job, but others are clearly lagging behind. I think there's a role for LEN to particularly also help those federations or those countries where learn to swim is maybe not high on the agenda, to help and raise awareness and get it there. So I think that's a role that has been taken up since we were elected quite actively. So hopefully, and coming back to diversity and inclusion, that is also going to help create, well, aquatic awareness among many different social areas.
Yeah. Pia, what is your opinion on that, Pia? Are you on mute?
Yeah, there's no doubt that Learn to Swim programs is very essential for all national federations. So this is a subject where we can come together and where we are very much aligned of the importance. And yes, of course, it's very different how how Learn to Swim is prioritized on a national level. In some countries, it's a very high awareness from governments, and in other countries it's almost not there. So making awareness and learn to swim and learn to love swimming and love aquatic sports is definitely also a task for LEN. And it's a lot about, of course, communication, but it's also about providing people to teach how to swim and make good teachers and good coaches for the future of the sports in all the disciplines. So I actually think that this is a natural place to be, and a very important agenda.
I think Nick as well would add a little bit to this around. I think it's useful to think about LEN in two ways. There's LEN, the organisation who runs national championships, but then there's also LEN, the community, the family, that isn't about the staff or the bureau or the officers. It's about all of the national federations as they come together at congresses or come together at the European Championships. So LEN's, as I say, is not just a thing, it's a community. And I think when we talk about the power of LEN or European Aquatics to move in things like diversity and inclusion, learn to swim, or protection of aquatic spaces for participation as we all face the challenges at local and government level of investment, it's that community coming together. It's where the power is going to come from in this space. So in this situation, it's about championing those and giving the opportunities for that community to come forward and drive forward together, not at the direction of the LEN, the organisation.
No, that's great. Graeme, thank you very much for that. Very interesting. I think we've come pretty much to the end of our presentation, our webcast today. What I'd like to do now is maybe just bring all the strands together, if you like, and just give you what I think were the sort of 5 takeaways from this presentation of what LEN is doing in terms of improving governance and in the field of integrity. I think for me, the 5 points were, first of all, have a clear plan that works for your organization. Make sure it applies to your organization and be very practical about that. Get your priorities. The second thing would make sure you get your priorities in order, have an action plan with milestones that you can achieve. Thirdly, get a committed steering group. It can be quite small and just people that you know will get the work done, because that's probably the most important part of this. Fourthly, do the consultation widely with the stakeholders, bring them along with you on this journey. And then I think the final thing, which Pia put up on her slide, keep it simple. You know, the best plan in the world is useless if it doesn't apply in the real world. So I think those would be my 5 points. And what I'd like to do with the guests we have with us today is just ask for them, what are the priorities now moving forwards? So in your opinion, Andida, from your point of view, what do you think is the next step? You know, we're not at the end of the journey by any means. And then ask the same to you, Pia and Graeme, in your fields or your areas, what are you looking at as the next big step? So Andida, maybe you start.
Yeah, I think for us right now, it's really like finish what we started. So we are about to implement this code. We are about to get the bronze standard, hopefully. So let's get that done, right? And then I think next is really, like Graeme said, talking about the family, looking out to our member federations and how we can share with them, and how we can also leverage what federations are already doing in this governance space to help each other and get better within Europe, right? Not just like the LEN organization, but the whole family.
Thank you, Andida. Pia?
Yeah, well, I look forward to the Congress and hopefully the approval of the Integrity Code, and then the next step will be actually to elect the people who will be in the integrity unit and in the adjudicatory body, and all the procedures to get them to work. I know it has been described in the code, but now it has to be in real. So I very much look forward to that.
Excellent. Thank you, Pia. Graeme?
And then from April, because it's the one that's least along its journey in terms of D&I think it's about creating some tangible goals. I think we need to have some wins to demonstrate what we're trying to achieve, so people believe, and go back to that point before about trust, transparency, that allow our community then to come together and share the rest of the journey. But without that KPI, that tangible, that measurable, that deliverable outcome, then it is just talking, and that's hard to build faith and trust around. So yeah, let's get something achieved is what I would say for D&I.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It falls upon me now to thank all the guests today. It's been a real pleasure to be here with you today. So thank you to President Antonio Silva. Thank you, Andida, Pia, Graeme. It's been really interesting, especially to me. So I hope it's been interesting also for the people watching on YouTube. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
In the end of this section, I would like to thank Nick for moderating, and also to Pia, to Graeme, and to Andida for not only the excellent contribution that they are doing in European aquatics related to the Pillar 1, good governance, integrity, and democracy, but also for the presentation that they made during this sports integrity unit. And of course, I will to address my compliments and wish the best to SIGA for the rest of the week.